Blog Talk Radio.
Baruch Hashem, this is Mark Lichtenwalter coming to you live on this 4th day of December 2019. The guest calling number for Fundamentally Mormon is 917-889-8827. That's 917-889-8827. We are going to be reading Man-Made Manifestos of the Church and the Priesthood by Ogden Kraut. We are live streaming also on Facebook at facebook.com/LAZURUS1977 and at youtube.com/user/God is my compass. Today is also the 6th day of Kislev according to the Hebrew calendar. And I just want to thank the Zarahemla Foundation for sending me this calendar today that I'm looking at for the Hebrew calendar. I appreciate that. I'm not exactly who it is. They had my address, though, and they sent it to me. So anyway, they had my old address, and luckily I got here before all the mail was forwarded to our new address. So anyway, I will take the phone calls after the reading. Any questions or comments can be posted at the Facebook live stream, and if they are during the show, I will try to answer them. You can also go to the chat room at the chat room's at the chat room is at blogtalkradio.com/fundamentally-Mormon. I'm a little bit tired right now, so I know there's things I'm missing, but let's get into the radio program or the reading right after. Fundamentally-Mormon.com if you want to read the text to this that we're going to be reading tonight. That's at fundamentally-Mormon.com for the blog post date of December 4th, 2019. And you can read the full text to the Church and the Priesthood at ogdenkraut.com as well. So I will also be posting these to all of my Facebook groups. On Facebook, I am the admin of LDS Gospel Mysteries, LDS Last Days Prophecy and Gospel Discussions, and Latter-day Unity, as well as a bunch of other groups as well, and pages: Church of the Living Messiah, Messiah Ben Joseph, Zion's Redemption Bookstore, bunch of different pages on Facebook. So anyway, let's get into the dedication, and then we'll get right into the reading. O God, the Eternal Father, Jehovah our Elohim, we come to thee in the name of thy Son, Yeshua, our Messiah. We thank thee, Father, for all of our many blessings. We ask thee, Father, to watch out over us as we go about our daily business. We dedicate this time unto thee to read these things, that we might understand things in the history of the restored church. We love thee, Father, and we desire to do thy will, that Zion might be redeemed. We ask for thy blessings and thy Spirit to be with us. And we say these things in thy Son's holy name, even Yeshua, our Messiah, or Jesus the Christ. Amen. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may no more be in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. Psalms chapter 83, verses 3 through 5. The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord, or against Jehovah our Elohim, and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. Psalms chapter 2, verses 2 through 3. In 1890, the LDS Church its members, and the priesthood experience perhaps the greatest trials and testings. But in this life, good and evil are continually pitted against each other. The world appears to be a great theatrical stage where universal powers are reaching out for the souls of men. It is not just a battle of armies and navies, but a contest of simple principles. The battle reaches from the throne of kings down to the secret and sacred chambers of the heart. It is an eternal conflict drawing men towards celestial light or the depths of darkness. If God has apostles, missionaries, and priesthood, so does the devil. Once again, they were to meet in a clash, not of arms, but of principles. Once again, these were the times that tried men's souls. Some of the faithful were sent to prison, while others compromised. A few even turned against their beliefs and became informants and persecutors. It was a time of decision on all levels, a time when the church leaders felt they had to make some official declarations in an effort to bring temporal relief. On December 2nd, 1889, an official declaration was issued by the church relative to an Idaho test oath law, which was unconstitutional but upheld by the Supreme Court. It was signed by the First Presidency and published in the Deseret News December 21st, 1889. On December 12th, 1889, a second official declaration was issued on the subject of blood atonement. Professor James R. Clark explained, This official declaration was a direct outgrowth of the testimony and accusation made in the case before Judge Anderson. The presidency and the 12 considered the matter when it was decided as the mind of the council that the first presidency and the 12 apostles get up a manifesto on the subject, such a one we can all sign. The declaration brands as false any claims that the LDS Church believed in or practiced blood atonement. The declaration or manifesto was dated December 12, 1889, and was published in the Evening and Morning News. Message of the First Presidency, Volume 3, page 183. The following is a photocopy of the December 12, 1889 official declaration showing part of pages 1 and 3. For those of you following along at fundamentallimormon.com or at ogdenkraut.com, we are on page 68. Official Declaration, Salt Lake City, December 12, 1889. To whom it may concern. In consequence of gross misrepresentation of the doctrines, aims, and practices of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly called the Mormon Church, which have been promulgated for years and have recently been revived for political purposes and to prevent all aliens otherwise qualified who are members of the Mormon Church from acquiring citizenship, we deem it proper on behalf of said church to publicly deny these calumnies and enter our protest against them. We solemnly make the following declaration. That this church views the shedding of human blood with the utmost abhorrence. That we regard the killing of a human being except in conformity with the civil law as a capital crime which should be punished by shedding the blood of the criminal after a public trial before a legally constituted court of the land. Notwithstanding all the stories told about the killing of apostates, no case of this kind has ever occurred, and of course has never been established against the church we represent. Hundreds of seceders from the church have continuously resided and now live in this territory, many of whom have amassed considerable wealth though bitterly hostile to the Mormon faith and people, even those who have made it their business to fabricate the vilest falsehoods and to render them plausible by culling isolated passages out of old sermons without any explanatory context, and have suffered no opportunity to escape them by vilifying and blackening the character of the people, have remained among those whom they have thus persistently culminated until the present day. Without receiving the slightest personal injury, we denounce as entirely untrue the allegation which has been made that our church favors or believes in the killing of persons who leave the church or apostatize from its doctrines. We would view a punishment of this character for such an act with the utmost horror. It is abhorrent to us and is in direct opposition with the fundamental principles of our creed. The revelations of God to this church make death penalty for capital crime and require that offenders against life and property shall be delivered up to and tried by the laws of the land. We declare that no bishop or other courts in this church claim or exercise a right to supersede, annul, or modify a judgment of any civil court. Such courts, while established to regulate Christian conduct, are purely ecclesiastical, and their punitive powers go no further than the suspension or excommunication of members from the church fellowship. That this church, while offering advice for the welfare of its members in all conditions of life, does not claim or exercise the right to interfere with citizens in the free exercise of social or political rights and privileges. The ballot in this territory is absolutely untrammeled and secret. No man's business or other secular affairs are invaded by the church or any of its officers. Free agency and the direct individual accountability to God are among the essentials of our church doctrine. All things in the church must be done by common consent, and no officer is appointed without the vote of the body. We declare that there is nothing in the ceremony of the endowment or in any doctrine, tenet, obligation, or injunction of this church, either private or public, which is hostile or intended to be hostile to the government of the United States. On the contrary, its members are under divine commandment to revere the Constitution as a heaven-inspired instrument. Utterances of prominent men in the church at a time of great excitement have been selected and grouped to convey the impression that the present members are seditious. Those expressions are made more than 30 years ago, when through the falsehoods of the recreant officials, afterwards demonstrated to be baseless troops, were sent to this afterwards demonstrated to be baseless, troops were sent to this territory and were viewed by the people in their isolated condition, 1,500 miles from railroads, as an armed mob coming to renew the bloody persecution of years before. At that time, excitement prevailed and strong language was used, but no words of disloyalty against the government or its institutions were uttered. Public speakers confined their remarks to denouncing treacherous officials who were prostituting the powers of their position to accomplish nefarious ends. Criticism of the acts of the United States officials was not considered then, neither is it now, as treason against the nation, nor as hostility to the government. In this connection, we may say that the members of our church have never offered or intended to offer any insult to the flag of our country, but have always honored it as an ensign of laws and liberty. We also declare that this church does not claim to be an independent temporal kingdom of God, or to be an imperium in imperio aiming to overthrow the United States or any other civil government. It has been organized by divine revelation preparatory to the second advent of the Redeemer. It proclaims that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Its members are commanded of God to be subject unto powers that be until Christ comes, whose right it is to reign. Church government and civil governments are distinct and separate in our theory and practice, and we regard it as part of our destiny to aid in the maintenance and the perpetuity of the institution of our country. We claim no religious liberty that we are unwilling to accord to others. We ask for no civil or political rights which are not granted or guaranteed to citizens in general. We desire to be in harmony with the government and people of the United States as an integral part of the nation. We regard all attempts to exclude aliens from naturalization and citizens from the exercise of elective franchise solely because they are members of the Mormon Church as impolitic, unrepublican, and dangerous encroachments upon civil and religious liberty. Notwithstanding the wrongs we consider we have suffered through the improper execution of national laws, we regard those wrongs as the acts of men and not the government. And we intend, by the help of the omnipotence, to remain firm in our fealty and steadfastness in the maintenance of constitutional principles and the integrity of this republic. We earnestly appeal to the American press and people not to condemn the Latter-day Saints unheard. Must we always be judged by the misrepresentations of our enemies and never be accorded a fair opportunity of representing ourselves? In the name of justice, reason, and humanity, we ask for a suspension of national and unpopular judgment until a full investigation can be had and all facts connected with what is called the Mormon question can be known. And we appeal to the eternal judge of all men and nations to aid us in our vindication of our righteous cause. Wilford Woodruff, George Q. Cannon, Joseph F. Smith. Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Lorenzo Snow, Franklin D. Richards, Brigham Young, Moses Thatcher, Francis Lyman, John Henry Smith, George Teasdale, Heber J. Grant, John W. Taylor, W. Merrill, H. Lund, Abraham H. Cannon, members of the Council of the Apostles, George W. Young, Daniel H. Wells, counselors. All right, so we're on page 69, and it looks like we're having a problem tonight with the Facebook live stream, so it's not working, and I don't know why. So it just keeps saying starting live video, and it doesn't start, so it is what it is. Of course, my wife, so my daughters got home today at 1, and so I slept until, I don't know, 6:30 or something like that, and then I got up, and tonight's Wednesday night, and my wife went to a church thing, so I couldn't use her phone to do the live stream, so I thought I would try to do a live stream on Facebook and one on YouTube, and it just doesn't work because the internet here is so sketchy. So hopefully everything records good on the Facebook live stream. So if anybody is, well, I can't tell the people on Facebook, but you know what? I did post the links to the Blog Talk Radio. So if people want to go on there, I guess they can go on there. But I wish I could do everything that I want to do. It's just I've got I've got limits that I can't make the internet better than it is. Although next summer or next year they said they're going to get fiber out to us, so that'll be nice. All right, so we're on page 69 of The Church and the Priesthood by Ogden Kraut, which you can read for free online at ogdenkraut.com. Click on Read Ogden's books and then scroll down to The Church and the Priesthood. We're on page 69. You can also find all the text to what we're reading tonight at fundamentallimormon.com blog post for the December 4th, 2019 blog post. So continuing on with page 69. A few months later came the third official declaration or manifesto from the LDS Church. This one pertained to plural marriage. All three of these manifestos were intended to soften the prejudices and the persecution from a hostile nation. In 1887, the United States carried out an astonishing act. A nation founded upon the principles of religious freedom, which had enshrined that principle in its Constitution's Bill of Rights, passed a law that dissolved a church. So what drives me nuts, like on the 4th of July now, I believe that the Constitution is next to Scripture, okay? But as a fundamentalist Mormon and as just a historian, the things that the federal government has done to destroy religious freedom in this country is disgusting and unconstitutional. I cannot be a patriot to a nation, especially with all the political mess that is always going on, the corruption and everything. I can stand as a patriot with the Constitution, but I don't understand why people are so gung-ho about, like, loving this country so much when it destroys, for instance, like polygamy. Like, that's a religious thing for Mormons, for Muslims, and for Jews. Orthodox Jews who follow the Torah perfectly, there must be polygamy among them as well. If they're going to follow the Torah, which says not to add to or take away from the words of this law or this instruction, there has to be polygamy. But the government is going to force, in a free religious country, that those things cannot be done without being subject to the point of the gun under penalty of federal law and state law, unconstitutional. The fact that we can't have United Orders because the government wants to get in everything, unconstitutional. And I just don't understand how people can be so patriotic. Yeah, I love the fireworks and whatever. I've read biographies on George Washington and John Taylor and others. I understand the history of the United States from what I've read. And I totally stand with the Founding Fathers and the Constitution and those rights which are supposed to be unalienable or unalienable. It's unalienable, by the way. But we don't get those rights in this country. And if any of you know what has happened in Short Creek, down in Hillsdale, to the FLDS people over the last 70, 80 years, it is a disgrace. Now, and I'm not talking about Warren Jeffs or any of those false prophets. I'm talking about the fact that these people want to live out their religious liberties and their for just to be polygamists. Okay, not to like marry children, which is what Warren Jeffs was doing, which was horrible. But for grown men and women to decide to live a religious system with United Orders and plural celestial marriage, and living the other tenets of their religion, and the government goes in with the behest of the LDS Church and its authority and the state of Utah and Arizona to lock these people up and take the children and tear apart their families, which is a thing, which has happened, which just happened a couple of years ago, maybe it's been 10 years, down in Texas. I don't know. I stand against it. I stand for right and truth. And if certain individuals are breaking certain laws, they should be gone after. But as a religious group, no. But that's what happens. Oh, let's just pit all the fundamentalists. And you know what the thing that drives me nuts? I know I'm getting on a rant. The LDS Church wants its members to think that there is only one sort of fundamentalist and that they all follow Warren Jeffs. There are thousands, tens of thousands of fundamentalists, both within the church and without the church, and very few of them by number are fundamentalists, are from the Church of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is Warren Jeffs' church. You've got the AUB, you've got the Righteous Branch of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You have my church, the Church of the Living Messiah, and many, many independent fundamentalists who remain within the LDS Church or are just independent. I've got plenty of friends that don't go to any churches. We try to have cottage meetings and stuff together as independent fundamentalists, but we don't all belong to the FLDS Church down in Short Creek or Hillsdale. I can't remember what the other name of it's called. I'm trying to think of the town. I've been there plenty of times, but I just can't remember it. Hillsdale is the one. It's right on the border of Utah and Arizona. Hillsdale's on the Arizona side, and then you've got the Utah side, which is, I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's get on with the reading. Let's see here. The Edmunds-Tucker Act of 1882 took direct aim at ending polygamy, and the Edmunds-Tucker Act of 1887 went far beyond authorizing polygamous or polig hunts, as they called them. It set out to destroy the church's temporal kingdom. And quote Mormon America R.J. Ostling, page 76. Thus a terrible burden was placed on the shoulders of President Wilford Woodruff. The United States government had become a vicious mob and was stealing, destroying, or throwing good men into prison, and women as well, and mostly men, but they do throw women in, and they take the children and throw them into foster cares. The vast majority of the Mormon people were opposed to living plural marriage, but were suffering because of the actions of a small minority. In this quandary, Woodruff tried to find a satisfactory solution. However, most of the answers were not supportive of the priesthood and its laws. A few months previously, the Lord had revealed to President Woodruff, and this is a revelation that Woodruff received, I believe in 1889, but it could be the 1887 revelation. Let not my servants who are called to the presidency of my church deny my word or my law, which concerns the salvation of the children of men. My kingdom shall roll forth, and that's a quote, but that's also part of the revelation that was received by Wilford Woodruff when he inquired of the Lord about it. A written revelation that the church wants to hide. Anyway, but that's taken from a quote, my kingdom shall roll forth, LDS Manual, page 58, also Messages of the First Presidency, Volume 3, page 175. Thus, Woodruff was caught between the United States government and most church members on one side of the Word of God, the priesthood, and the polygamists on the other. Some type of compromise seemed inevitable, and he presented such to the Quorum of the 12, or on page 70 of The Church and the Priesthood by Ogden Kraut, which you can read at fundamentalmormon.com. Although Wilford Woodruff had been a vocal opponent to any form of concession with the government concerning plural marriage during the Taylor administration, when the leadership of the church fell on him as senior apostle, he began to seek avenues of compromise. Now, you want to read a good book about this? Go read Compromise and Concession by Ogden Kraut, which you can read for free at ogdenkraut.com. Compromise and Concessions. During the next 3 years, he would present to the quorum on at least two occasions drafts of documents that would relinquish plural marriage. Both were soundly rejected by the rest of the Quorum of the 12, and, quote, collected discourses by Brian Manifestoi, Volume 2, pages 23 through 24. Wilford Woodruff also had admitted, quote, "After I became president of the church, I did not advocate the practice of this principle among our people, but that was what I saw before me, and it was upon the grounds that I issued the manifesto." Okay. That was upon the grounds that I issued the manifesto. Let me just try to reboot this stupid thing here. I believe it was my duty and the duty of our people to obey the law. Deseret News Weekly, October 20th, 1891. Actually, you know what? I'm not even going to mess with it. Let's see here. It'll probably just create havoc on the live stream for the YouTube video, so I'm just not doing a Facebook Live for this video. I might do one for the next one that I do later on. So, President Woodruff was also caught between the loud clamor of the people and his own silent conviction of the truthfulness of this marriage covenant. This was God's covenant, a spiritual contract that should not be broken. Once the saints had entered into such eternal covenants, they should not look back. Lot's wife taught us that. Reverend George Peters, author of the 3-volume set on the theocratic kingdom, wrote a precious gem that should be an anchor to our souls. He said, "Any theory, inference, or doctrine which militates against the covenants is not only open to grave suspicion, but must be rejected, no matter by whom presented, however eloquently urged. God does not contradict himself." Theocratic Kingdom, Peters, Volume 3, page 565, or on page 71 of the Church and the Priesthood. A similar test had been experienced by President John Taylor 5 years before. Quote, "There had been some talk about President Taylor issuing a revelation abolishing the system of marriage. When a revelation of that kind is given, it will be when the Lord has no use for the saints." Deseret News, April 6, 1885. Until now, there had been no literal shots fired and no one had been killed, but Brigham Young hadn't been that concerned if it were to happen, for he commented, "Suppose that the wicked kill us. Who cares? They never will kill any, but what it will swell the kingdom a little faster." Journal of Discourses, Volume 2, page 374. Under such stressful conditions, Wilford Woodruff issued the Manifesto of 1889, in actuality a press release with the hope it would have peaceful results. Page 72. To whom it may concern. Press dispatches having been sent for political purposes from Salt Lake City, which have been widely published to the effect that the Utah Commission, in their recent report to the Secretary of the Interior, alleged that plural marriages are still being solemnized and that 40 or more such marriages have been contracted in Utah since last June or during the past year. Also that in public discourses, the leaders of the church have taught, encouraged, and urged the continuance of the practice of polygamy. I, therefore, as President of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, do hereby in most solemnly manner declare that these charges are false. We are not teaching polygamy or plural marriage, nor permitting any person to enter into its practice, and I deny that either 40 or any number of plural marriages have during that time been solemnized in our temple or any other place in the territory. How could he say that? Because he wouldn't know, but whatever. I'm a little bit disgusted on how quickly they give up living what they believe to be something that is required for exaltation because the government decides to persecute them. It's sad. really. It really is. And that's why there's fundamentalists, because the fundamentalists are going to live God's law regardless of what anybody says. Because who do we obey, God or man? Anyway, one case has been reported in which the parties alleged that the marriage was performed in the endowment house in Salt Lake City in the spring of 1889, but I have not been able to learn who performed that ceremony. Whatever was done in the manner was without my knowledge. In consequence of this alleged occurrence, the endowment house was, by my instruction, taken down without delay. So they destroy an endowment house because of an allegation. Inasmuch as laws have been enacted by Congress forbidding plural marriage, which laws have been pronounced unconstitutional by the court of last resort, I hereby declare my intention to submit to those laws and to use my influence with the members of the church over which I preside to have them do likewise. There is nothing in my teachings to the church or to those of my associates during the time specified which can reasonably construed to inculcate or encourage polygamy. And when any elder of the church has used language which appeared to convey any such teachings has been promptly removed. So let's get rid of anybody who tries to teach God's laws. Don't talk about what Brigham or John Taylor said. Let's just get away from it because we're worried that somebody's going to flip out about it. And now I publicly declare that my advice to the Latter-day Saints is to refrain from contracting any marriage forbidden by the law of the land. Signed, Wilford Woodruff, President of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Page 73 of the Church and the Priesthood. Important ideas to point out regarding the manifesto are: it was addressed to whom it may concern. We must decide who that might be. Was it the government, the church, the individual church member, lawyers, or Gentiles? It didn't say. It began as an answer to and was mostly concerned with press dispatches. It appeared to be written for them. Wilford Woodruff said, I deny that either 40 or any number of plural marriages have during that period been solemnized in our temples or any other place in the territory. He knew, however, because he was lying for the Lord, which is still a sin, a grave sin, whatever. He knew, however, that these marriages were being performed in Canada and Mexico. Then because someone had performed a plural marriage in the endowment house, he said, in consequence of this alleged occurrence, the endowment house was by my instructions, taken down without delay. Endowment houses is a place where people could go get sealings and stuff, live sealings. So temples, according to LDS theology, at least it used to be, are for the dead, right? John Taylor, he actually was sealed to some of his wives and did sealings in a grove of trees. They did the endowments in a grove of trees. They created endowment houses so that people could receive their endowments and other ordinances for the living. Before the temples were able to be set up. So, in fact, they used to do baptisms for the dead in the Mississippi River, but we were told in Section 124 that once a temple's built that we should do it there. So anyway, I know a lot of LDS people don't know this history. They don't know their own history. They know a whitewashed version of their own history, but okay, let's continue on. Since Congress had forbidden plural marriages, Wilford Woodruff declared his intention was to submit to those laws, which he disregarded 7 years later when he was sealed to a Palestinian lady lecturer, Miss Lydia Montford. Wilford Woodruff personally said he would submit to those laws and would use my influence with the members of the church to have them do likewise. This was his influence rather than God's revelation. So this is him doing it. This isn't God telling you. Because we know through the revelations given by God to the church members, John Taylor and Wilford Woodruff between the 1880 and 1890s, in that 10-year time period, that they were told continually not to give in to the laws, not give in to the government, make no promises. How can I revoke my law? It's an everlasting law. So what Wilford Woodruff did, he did it on his own. He didn't get instruction from God to do this. And the manifesto was not a revelation. Charles W. Penrose, who was an apostle in the church, is the one who wrote it, and he admitted to that. This was his influence rather than God's revelation. When any elder of the church used language to encourage the practice of plural marriage, he has been promptly reproved. Page 74. When Woodruff said, "There is nothing in my teachings or in any others that would encourage polygamy," it announced the end of the era of celestial marriage within the church. Then, in conclusion, he said, "I, Wilford Woodruff, not the Lord, now publicly declare that my advice to the Latter-day Saints is to refrain from contracting any marriage forbidden by the law of the land." So, when he's the one, Wilford Woodruff's the one that made up that whole false doctrine that the prophet can never lead you astray, which actually contradicts Scripture and contradicts verses and passages in the Scriptures. Joseph Smith taught that anyone who contradicts the Bible, the Book of Mormon, or the Doctrine and Covenant, you can set them down as imposters. And if Wilford Woodruff was a prophet, which I believe he was, I do not believe that he was the Lord's anointed, because God calls prophets among us all. And Wilford Woodruff's right was to be a steward over the church. And so in that sense, I do believe he was a prophet, but I do not believe he's the Lord's anointed because of what I've said in the past about Section 124 and the rejection of the church in Nauvoo, which is talked about in Section 124 for those who have eyes to see and minds to understand. But he was a fallen prophet. And do you know what happened to him? He became a keynote speaker at the Bohemian Grove, the Bohemian Club, which is a very devious arm of the Illuminati. They actually do sacrifices to Moloch, the owl god, child sacrifices. They used to do them. They do them in effigy now, which means they bring basically a life-size doll and they do mock child sacrifices. But at that time, they did live sacrifices. And Wilford Woodruff was a keynote speaker at one of the meetings there because he gave in to them. He gave in to the Illuminati, to the government of Satan, and they actually murdered him the next morning. And I couldn't believe it at first when I found that, but I went and researched, and there are articles in the Salt Lake Tribune back when it happened, the New York Times, and San Francisco Herald or something. I don't know. I found 3 different historical news clippings or articles about the subject where it states he was a keynote speaker at the Bohemian Club and he died the next day. And so we know by forensic knowledge that Brigham Young, John Taylor, and Wilford Woodruff all were poisoned to death. Brigham Young and John Taylor had levels of arsenic in their corpses when they were exhumed, and they found in both places, in their personal effects, which the church keeps everything for museum and whatever, in their coffee cups. I know that for the modern Mormon, what coffee? They're not allowed to have coffee. If you knew the history of the Word of Wisdom, you'd know that it wasn't implemented as a commandment until Heber J. Grant. I don't want to get into that. But in their coffee cups, both John Taylor and Brigham Young had arsenic. They were poisoned by their secretary, and I'm not going to say who that was, but if you know the history, you know who it was. But like the first four presidents of the church, Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, John Taylor, and Wilford Woodruff were all murdered. And there's been others as well after that time, and that's a different subject. And you know what? I should have Kevin Kraut on sometime to talk about that, because he understands that stuff in a way that he can speak about it, where I can just say a little bit here and there because I haven't really studied it a lot. But anyway, continuing on. A prophet of God will always tell you to obey the laws of God regardless of any other laws, rules, or codes. Prophets do not advise people to disobey the laws of God so that they can be convenienced by the laws of man. Since the Manifesto of 1890 was a decisive factor in priesthood authority existing outside the LDS Church organization, we need to learn more about this important document. Thus, the following issues will be discussed more in detail. Who wrote the Manifesto? Was the Manifesto a revelation? Did the Manifesto really stop plural marriage? One plural marriage manifesto or many? Comparisons and contradictions. The Manifesto in retrospect. Who wrote the Manifesto? If the Manifesto was actually a revelation from God, then we would know that the law of plural marriage was not an eternal one, that it could be revoked and is not necessary for our exaltation. In that case, fundamentalist Mormons would have no grounds for living plural celestial marriage today. Furthermore, we know that it is not an eternal priesthood law. Page 75. However, if the Manifesto is not a revelation from God, then there must be evidence to prove it. A thorough study of the Manifesto is vital to correctly understand priesthood today. First of all, let's determine its sources of authorship. There is no reference made about God in the text. It does not say, "Thus saith the Lord," and it is signed by only one person, Wilford Woodruff, not by common consent, although according to the following information, he did not write it either. Shortly after the turn of the 19th century, a missionary serving in England and Wales by the name of Thomas R. Rosser had an experience that indicated the true authorship of the Manifesto. In a letter to Robert C. Newson, of Salt Lake City, dated August 4th, 1956, Rosser related the following account. Then I went back to Bristol, England, my headquarters, to a conference which was held Sunday, May 24th, 1908. On Monday morning, the 25th, our conference priesthood meeting was held, which lasted 4 hours and a half. After the preliminary exercises, President Charles W. Penrose asked if any of the brethren had any questions on their mind, and if so, to present them now before he delivered his message to us. Up went my hand. All right, he said. President Penrose, I said, I have heard much discussion on the principle of plural marriage, some saying that it was withdrawn from the earth and that the Manifesto was a revelation from God. Dear President, what about this case? Then I related to him the testimony of the sister, which is written above, and then I asked him, why should she receive this testimony if God has withdrawn the principle from the earth and the Manifesto is a true revelation from God? President Penrose then rose to his feet, scratched the side of his head with his right hand for a moment or so, then stretched out his hand towards us and said, Brethren, I will answer that question, if you will keep it under your hats. I, Charles W. Penrose, wrote the Manifesto with the assistance of Frank J. Cannon and John White. It is no revelation from God, for I wrote it. Wilford Woodruff signed it to beat the devil at his own game. Brethren, how can God withdraw an everlasting principle from the earth? He has not and cannot, and I testify to you as a servant of God that it is true. The reason this statement is given is because I have heard so much discussion as to whether or not the manifesto is a revelation from God. So I wish to relate herewith the understanding given to us by the Bristol Conference by Charles W. Penrose on May 25th, 1908. Sincerely, your brother, O.S. Thomas J. Rosser. Entire letter is quoted in the Holy Priesthood by Ogden Kraut, Volume 6, page 264 and 265, which you can read at ogdenkraut.com. Click on Read Ogden's Books. Scroll down to the Holy Priesthood, Volume 6, and then you can go right down to it. I've never gone through them. I mean, I've read them, but I haven't read them on a radio show, and that's one of the ones that I am scared of. It's like a Mount Everest. Like I said that about 95 Thesis, but that one really is like a Mount Everest because it's so huge. It's like volumes, like it's a lot to read. So the LDS Church responded to this information by saying that they had no record of Rosser or Penrose being in Wells in May 1908. However, the Wells meeting had been moved to Bristol according to the following report recorded in the Millennial Star. See, they say, oh, we don't know anything about that, but we find evidence that, yeah, that meeting really did happen. It drives me nuts. We should deny that Charles Penrose was even there so that what he was purported to say is is done away with. So don't worry. It's like the wizard in the Wizard of Oz. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. He does not exist. Only pay attention to the wizard. Oh, it drives me nuts. Anyway, the Bristol Semi-Annual Conference was held May 24th, 1908 in the Wolseley Hall, Eastville, Bristol. There were present President Charles W. Penrose, President C.G. Jarman, and 24 traveling elders of the Bristol Conference. And that's the way it's supposed to be. The 70s are supposed to accompany the 12 as they go out, and Charles W. Penrose was one of the 12. They don't do that anymore. Not like they are supposed to, but that's going off in tangents I'm not going to talk about on this particular video or radio show. After singing and prayer, President Jarman gave all present to a heartily welcome, expressed his appreciation at seeing so many saints and friends present from the outlying districts. Elder R.J. Walker, Thomas J. Rosser, Frank I. Hill, and John H. Bodden gave reports to their respective branches. Their reports were very encouraging. Millennial Star, Volume 70, page 348. Page 77. Elder George Reynolds also gave his testimony that he too helped draft the manifesto. His statement was presented in the Smoot hearings in Washington, D.C. on January 1904. The chairman, I do not know, but I may have misunderstood. I understood this manifesto was inspired. Mr. Reynolds, yes, that's funny, Jeremy Reynolds, CES letter. Whatever. The chairman, what is your understanding of it? Mr. Reynolds, my understanding is that it was inspired. The chairman, and when it was handed to you, it was inspired. It was an inspiration as you understood from on high, was it not? Mr. Reynolds, yes. Chairman, what business had you changing it? Mr. Reynolds, we did not change the meaning. Justification, right? The chairman, you have just stated you changed it. Mr. Reynolds, not the sense, sir. I didn't state we changed the sense. If you receive a revelation from God, what right do you have to change it? Oh, we didn't change the meaning of it. That's just like in the endowment. Oh, we didn't change the meaning of it. We just got rid of a bunch of stuff. Like, if God gives something a certain way, what right does anybody else have to change it? So, anyway, the chairman, but you changed the phraseology. Mr. Reynolds, we simply put it in shape for publication, corrected the grammar, and wrote it so that the chairman, you mean to say that in an inspired communication from the Almighty, the grammar was bad, was it? You corrected the grammar of the Almighty, did you? End quote. Read Smoot Hearings, Volume 2, page 52 and 53. We're only halfway through this monster of a chapter, and oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to take a break here in a minute. But I don't have a commercial because I don't know how to do these audio clips on the radio show. I had a friend who did them before, and I don't know how. I'm so inadequate to do podcasts and all these. I don't understand things. It's amazing that I got this far in doing these radio programs because I suck. Anyway, continuing on. Later in his testimony, he identifies two others who helped author the manifesto. Mr. Worthington, you said something about helping to write the manifesto. Will you explain that? Mr. Reynolds, President Woodruff wrote it in his own hand, and he was a very poor writer, worse, I believe, than Horace Greeley, and he gave it into the hands of three of the elders to prepare it for the press. I was one of those three. Mr. Worthington, who were the three? Mr. Reynolds, C.W. Penrose, Charles W. Penrose, John R. Winder, and myself. End quote. And that's volume 2, page 269. Thus, according to the above two separate accounts, there were at least 6 brethren who assisted in writing the manifesto, namely Wilford Woodruff, Charles W. Penrose, Frank J. Cannon, John White, John R. Winder, and George Reynolds. Isn't it amazing that so many men would be required to improve on the revelation from the Lord before it should be presented to the saints for their vote? It was often brought up that the manifesto was only a trick to beat the devil at his own game. This was mentioned by President Charles Penrose in his Bristol Missionary Conference. It also came up in the Smoot Hearings in 1904 to 1905, according to Professor Wolf from Provo. Mr. Wolf, there was a meeting in the Brigham Young Academy in Provo, Utah, that was addressed by B.H. Grant, a brother of the Apostle Heber J. Grant. At that meeting, Apostle John Henry Smith was present. The chairman, on what date was that? What year? Mr. Wolf, I don't remember the year. It was in the late 90s, probably. Or it was in the late 90s, probably. Mr. Carlisle. It was after the manifesto. Mr. Wolf, yes, sir, it was after the manifesto. On my way home, I walked several blocks with B.F. Grant and Apostle Smith, and on the way, we were talking about the conditions existing, and President Smith used these words to me, Brother Wolf, don't you know that the manifesto is only a trick to beat the devil at his own game? That's in volume 4, page 13. Page 79. Does this sound like a description of a revelation from God? The Salt Lake Tribune of January 16, 1906, exposed this same plot behind the manifesto. The headlines read, Manifesto only trick to beat the devil at his own game. Church schemers decided on a political manifesto with the federal government to beat them at their own game. They conceived the idea that if they made a polygamy concession with the government, they could then obtain statehood. As a state, they would introduce a law that would provide protection for those living plural marriage. Utah gained its statehood and finally introduced a bill which would allow the religious practice of plural marriage in the state. Senate Bill number 113 was introduced on March 6, 1901 by Abel John Evans. It was to amend Section 4611 of the revised statute of Utah, but the Governor Heber M. Wells, a product himself of plural marriage, vetoed the bill with the excuse that it offered the polygamists only a false hope of protection. So that the ray of hope behind issuing the manifesto was shattered within 5 years. Instead of laws being amended and instigated by the state for the protection of polygamists, the laws became worse. And in 1934, plural marriage was made a felony. Thus ended the trick to beat the devil at his own game. Instead, the devil used the Mormons themselves to win it for him. A bill to protect polygamists was never again presented for passage. Page 80. Was the manifesto a revelation? There can be certain criteria that can be used in determining whether or not something is a revelation from God. Probably the easiest one to recognize is when it contains the words, "Thus saith the Lord." In the Doctrine and Covenants, there are 64 "Thus saith the Lord" revelations. The rest may be revelations, but should be more correctly considered pronouncements or statements. The Bible has over 450 "Thus saith the Lord." I need to get a ventilation system for this office because the attic is right there because we're upstairs. And all these computers and all these lights are causing me to have a heat stroke. Anyway, I could probably put a vent right there, but something I'll have to do later. The Bible has over 450 "Thus saith the Lord" revelations, immediately identifying the true author of the statement. For over a century, historians have looked without success for indications that the manifesto could be considered a revelation from God. On the other hand, there are several indications that it was written by man. In the 1890 manifesto, Wilford Woodruff was used such as terms. You know, I got to add a call real quick. I'm going to call my wife and tell her to not allow the kids to turn on the internet because that'll just screw up the whole thing. Are you there?
Can you hear me? I'm in the driveway.
Okay. I figured you were probably about home. You're live on the radio show.
Hi, everybody. It's snowing really bad. Don't drive.
Oh, that's why I'm not going to go drive tonight. Is it really snowing here?
Oh, it's bad. Yeah. I went like maybe 30 on the highway, and luckily somebody turned on our road because I couldn't find it. I had my window down trying to see where the turn was.
I'm sweating to death up here in the office. Okay, so the reason I called you is because the kids cannot turn the TV on to use the internet at all. I'm doing a radio show, and it will only screw everything up, and I'm not even halfway through the reading at this point.
Wow, okay.
So tell them they can do laundry, they can clean kitchens, they can make the living room nice, they can do all sorts of fun things. But they cannot use the internet.
Okay.
All right.
Let me go because I have to go in the house.
Okay, fine. You don't want to mute yourself and listen to my awesome reading of the manifesto stuff?
Well, since it's 9 o'clock and I have 5 kids, I need to get people ready for school and bed and all that fun stuff. So, love you lots.
All right, love you too. Bye.
Bye.
All right. I knew they were going to be home any minute now, so like they apparently just pulled in the driveway. And if my kids jump on the internet, it's going to screw up the live stream on the Facebook. I mean, on the YouTube, and it drives me nuts when that happens. This whole thing drives me nuts. Like I have this overwhelming urge to do these radio programs, but it drives me nuts because like it takes so much time and effort to actually do them. And with the schedule I have, it is very, very difficult to do them. So if I'm going to do them, I hope that I can at least have the YouTube live stream, which, by the way, thanks. Somebody just commented on the chat on live stream of YouTube that YouTube is still working. Thanks for that. We do have the chat room available at blogtalkradio.com/fundamentally Mormon as well, and the YouTube live stream. So, all right. Continuing on. I, therefore, as president of the church, I deny I have not been. My instructions, I hereby declare, I preside, my associates, I now publicly declare that my advice is, just a nobody. Good to see ya. I know who you are. If anybody wants to watch some good videos, got some pretty good information, check out Just a Nobody on YouTube. So anyway, then to top it out, he signed it with his own signature, thus to determine that the true source of the manifesto is very simple. It came from Wilford Woodruff. It could not be any clearer than if it began by saying, thus saith Wilford Woodruff. Page 81. A comparable declaration or press release was issued several years later in 1978. Thus declaration on blacks receiving the priesthood began by saying, dear brethren, and continued with, we have witnessed, as inspired us with the desire, we have pleaded long and earnestly, we declared with soberness, and concluded with, sincerely yours, signed by the First Presidency. The authorship is clear. Church members were asked to vote on this revelation, even though a thus saith the Lord revelation was not produced to support it. In contrast, the church does not recognize the 1886 thus saith the Lord revelation to John Taylor for the following reasons. Church leaders claim it is not in the LDS archives, because they're liars, because they will lie to uphold what they've done. Okay? The saints never voted to accept or adopt it, being the revelation received by John Taylor. Now, you know what? Whether a revelation is accepted by the church, if it is given by the Father or the Son, it's a revelation. Whether you like it or not, whether you accept it or not. Church leaders and the majority of the saints choose to be at peace with the government and fellow citizens. It is interesting to note that in 1933, Heber J. Grant issued the following official statement concerning the 1886 revelation. Quote, it is alleged that on September 27, 1886, President John Taylor received a revelation from the Lord, the purported text of which is given in publications circulated apparently by or at the instance of the same organization of polygamists, which they love to call cultists, right? All those cultists. Oh. As this pretended revelation, it should be said that the archives of the church contains no such revelation, except for that it is in the English, or the Doctrine and Covenants, which was printed in England. I know people who have that Doctrine and Covenants. I've seen it in that historical record, but, whatever. I guess somebody didn't get the memo that, we shouldn't put this in the Doctrine and Covenants in the United States, so whatever. nor any evidence justifying a belief that any such revelation was ever given. From the personal knowledge of some of us, from the uniform and common recollection of the presiding quorums of the church, was the absence in the church archives of any evidence whatsoever justifying any belief that such a revelation was given, except for Heber J. Grant sat on the excommunication trial of John W. Taylor, John Taylor's son, who brought forth the evidence. So he knew that there was evidence. And they excommunicated him and one of the other apostles for not going along with everybody else because they accepted this revelation and they brought it forth. So when Heber J. Grant's all like, oh, we don't know anything about that. That is a lie. He is a lying fool. And he was an Illuminatist as well. In fact, Heber J. Grant said that the heavens had always been like brass to him at the end of his life. He was not a prophet, seer, and revelator. He was a deceiver and a devil. All right, we're on page 82. Justifying any belief that such a revelation was given, we are justified in affirming that no such revelation exists. Liar! Furthermore, so far as the authorities of the church are concerned, and so far as the members of the church are concerned, since this pretended revelation, if ever given, was never presented to and adopted by the church or by any council of the church, liar, the said pretended revelation could have no validity and no binding effect and force upon church members, and actions under it would be unauthorized, illegal, and void. Official statement, church section of Deseret News, June 18th, 1933. Now, if God gave instruction in the Torah on when plural marriage should be lived, and if God gave instruction to the prophet Joseph Smith on how and when plural marriage should be lived, and if Brigham Young received revelation and taught how plural marriage should be lived, then it doesn't matter if this revelation ever came forth or not, because we're supposed to follow the revelations of God. The fact of the matter, this revelation has plenty of evidence that it does exist, that it was given, and we were told not to do away with the law of eternal, the everlasting covenant, which I have a little bit of a different interpretation on personally, but we're not supposed to do away with these things. If we make covenants in the pre-existence to live a certain law with certain individuals, we break those covenants with them to their damnation and ours. All right, we're about halfway through, and luckily the radio show, it's only 2 hours of live streaming, but people who call in can listen to the whole thing. I have up to 3 hours of radio show, and I only want to do one chapter a day, and I hope that they're like between 30 to 45 minutes long, but it seems like some of these books get into these chapters, and it's like, holy crap, there's a ton of information. So we're going to try to get through it all in one sitting, even if I have to have heat stroke and almost die. Good thing I'm immortal, right? Just kidding. All right. I'm just kidding about that. I like to joke around that I can't die because I have been stabbed, I've been hung, I have been poisoned, I've been blown up, I've been shot at several times, and there's been so many times out on the road when I should have been in bad accidents and things, I get protected. So I always like to joke that I am immortal, but I do know that I have a death date eventually. I have a date with death eventually, so just so that those of you who think that I'm crazy don't think that I also think that I'm immortal, even though I like to joke that I am. All right. As a sidelight, the author called the LDS archives and asked for a copy of the revelation on which the official declaration of 1978 was based. He was told that there was no revelation on record other than the published statement itself. Thus, using the same criteria of the 1890 and 1978 declaration as that which Kraut imposed on the 1886 revelation, any action under it would be unauthorized, illegal, and void. So if we hold them to the same standards as the fact that, well, they didn't like present it to for common consent, this revelation. So this revelation that was received by John Taylor is null and void. Are they going to hold themselves to the same standards for the 1890 and the 1978 revelation, which there is no revelation? It's never been presented to the church. It's never been presented to any council. It is a lie to beat the devil at his own game, because the church in 1978 was about to lose its 501c3 and have church properties confiscated by the government, which happened in the 1800s. They stole everything over $50,000, which at that time, I think the church's assets were about $3 million. They stole it. The government came in and stole it, and they were about to do the same thing in 1978 when Jimmy Carter went to Spencer W. Kimball and threatened him to withdraw the 501c3 status of the church unless we give the blacks the priesthood. Now, whether the blacks should have the priesthood or not is a different issue. What I have a problem with is the government getting involved in forcing people who want to live a certain way and confiscating their properties and throwing them in jail because they believe that blacks shouldn't have the priesthood. They didn't say blacks couldn't be in the church. And if you're like from Fiji or something and you're black, like you could have the priesthood. If you're an Aborigine in Africa, you could have the priesthood even though you were black. It was West African blacks that were not supposed to have the priesthood because they were the seed of Cain. Now, Canaan, when Ham cursed Canaan, his son, to be a servant of servants, Canaan had 3 other brothers who were also black, the sons of Egyptus. They were also black, but the curse that came upon Canaan did not come upon those other blacks, those others who were black. They were black by the curse of Cain, according to LDS theology, which I get into, right? Whether I believe it or not, that's a separate issue, but we're talking about fundamentally Mormon. So anyway, because the archives of the church contain no such revelation. Furthermore, because of the absence in the church's archives of any evidence whatsoever justifying any belief that such a revelation was given, we are justified in affirming that no such revelation exists. So let's just turn the words right around on Heber J. Grant. So according to the criteria established by President Heber J. Grant, the official declaration of both 1890 and 1978 are unauthorized, illegal, and void, as many fundamentalist Mormons have already suspected, or that we know, we understand. President Wilford Woodruff claimed that the Lord told him what the Lord told him to do, to present the manifesto to the saints for a vote, which he did. That is the proper order of the church. The members can vote for or against a particular doctrine or policy, since the Lord will not force the saints to live plural marriage or any other doctrine against their will. But the saints have no right to tell anybody else how they should live. And that's in our Articles of Faith on page 83 of the Church and the Priesthood. Returning to the question, was the manifesto a revelation? The answer became a little more clear in December of 1891, when some Gentiles told the Mormon leaders they should send a petition for amnesty to the government because they had compliantly issued I guess, I don't know, issued the manifesto. Church leaders responded and sent a petition to President Harrison stating, quote, to be in peace with the government and in harmony with their fellow citizens, who are not of their faith, and to share in the confidence of the government and our people. Our people have voluntarily put aside something which all their lives they have believed to be a sacred principle. Smoot Hearings, Volume 1, page 18. This statement that they voluntarily put aside a sacred principle does not specify that it was a commandment from God, but a free choice by church members. So this was a free choice by church members to put aside God's commandments. Now, you can choose to do whatever you want, but there are consequences to your actions. It was so stated and signed by the church presidency and all of the apostles. Did the manifesto stop plural marriage? In the book entitled The Life of Joseph F. Smith by Joseph Fielding Smith, it listed the names of 14 children born to Joseph F. and 5 of his wives after the manifesto. However, he was not an exception because hundreds of states in Utah, Canada, and Mexico continued bearing and raising children by plural wives, and many took new wives as well. Other leading church apostles, another leading church apostle was exposed by the Salt Lake Tribune on September 9th, 1899. Heber J. Grant confessed in court to living with his 3 wives and paid a $100 fine. The following picture appeared in the newspapers, and that's on page 84 if you've got the book. We don't have the picture available to us. I do actually back there, those green books behind me, behind my shoulder here. But I'm not going to get into them. So then I don't have desk space for one. Then on October 8, 1910, the Salt Lake Tribune, known for its anti-polygamy position, listed the names of 200 new polygamists, 6 of whom were members of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. This list follows with the names of the apostles in caps: Albrecht, Isaac, Bentley, Joseph C., Allred, Calvert, Black, David, Anderson, Alfred, Blackmore, Badger, Rodney C., Bloomfield, John Barlow, Israel Jr., Henry C. Bowman. This drives me nuts. Hold on. Ezra Brown, Chris Breinholt, John Baycraft, Theodore Brandley, Fred Beasley, Orson P. Brown, Ephraim Bench, Richard D. Brown, Heber Benyon, William Buckholt, Israel Benyon, Elder Butler, S.R. Benyon, Anson B. Call, Willard Call, Samuel Jarvis, A.H. Cannon, an apostle, Jens Johansson, Angus J. Cannon, Benjamin Johnson, George M. Cannon, David Johnson, Hugh J. Cannon, Heber Johnson, and on it goes. I'm not going to read them all because you can read it for yourself. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's just a lot of names. And they put the first names last and the last names first, so it's like, what? Matthias F. Cowley, who was an apostle of the church in that day. See if I can find any other apostles. A lot of these are probably 70s, but Joseph F. Musser, or Joseph W. Musser, he's in my priesthood line of authority, by the way. Goes from me, it goes to Kevin, then Ogden, then Joseph Musser, and then back from there. I have a very short line of authority. Little tangent while we're getting through all of these names. You know what? It's good that there's a lot of names, though, because I thought that I was going to have to read for another hour and a half. And, like, if these names are going to continue on, then that makes me happy because although I do like to read, like I said, this wears me out. I don't have a lot of time to do a lot of things, and I try to fit this in my schedule. And I'm happy when I finish one chapter, and I want to do them. It's so difficult, and I'm not not that it's about money, but like I've spent thousands of dollars trying to make these videos and these like podcasts. Which, by the way, you can read, do this. The podcasts are on iTunes, Fundamentally Mormon. But here's another apostle, A.O. Woodruff. Anyway, but it takes away from my ability to work, for one, so I'm losing money by doing these podcasts, and I get very little support from people. And so, but you know what? My gift will be in the kingdom. So if I had it now, maybe I wouldn't have it then. I think I would. Anyway, here's another, John W. Taylor, who was an apostle, George Teasdale, who was an apostle. Most new plural marriages after the Manifesto were performed in Canada and Mexico, with some in the United States or at sea beyond the national boundaries. These sealings were performed, they had an endowment ship, right? They should have a cruise ship. I saw the LDS Church was considering doing a temple cruise ship. Temple. They got billions of dollars. I mean, they might as well. But they probably won't. These sealings were performed by such leaders as George Q. Cannon, Joseph F. Smith, John W. Taylor, Anthony W. Ivins, Matthias F. Cowley, and John Henry Smith, all apostles, as well as others outside of the quorum, or the quorum of the 12. These ordinances were generally performed very secretly. For instance, a recommend was often written in code, as the following letter exemplifies. Note, for more proof of post-manifesto plural marriage, the author recommends Michael W. Quinn's article, LDS Church Authority and New Plural Marriages, 1890 to 1904, Dialogue, Volume 18, Verse 1, Spring 1985, pages 9 to 105, Pioneer Electric, Power Company of Utah, Office of President and Treasury, Salt Lake City, Utah, February 1st of 98. Dear Brother Anthony, I take the liberty of introducing the bearer to you. He expects to visit your country to attend to some business there. Actually, it's kind of funny because David O. McKay was actually plurally sealed to his wife and his secretary, another female, even in the 1950s. And I don't remember when David O. McKay died, but he became president of the church in 1957. So there's church polygamy, and even in the current church today, you've got Dallin H. Oaks, who is sealed to 2 women, 1 not living, and Russell M. Nelson, who's sealed to 2 women, 1 not living. So that's how they live plural marriage today. Like, they wait till their wives die and then they get some more. Whatever. He expects to visit your country to attend to some business there, and I think, stranger as he is, you can be of service to him. Whatever aid you can render him will be appreciated by your brother, George Q. Cannon. A coded recommendation letter from George Q. Cannon to Anthony W. Ivins in Mexico to authorize him to perform a plural marriage on page 88 of the Church and the Priesthood. 1 plural marriage, manifesto, or many. On April 12th, we have a phone call, and I will bring them on in just a minute as soon as we get through this. On April 6, 1904, Joseph F. Smith issued what later became known as the Second Manifesto. This was also an official declaration without any revelation supporting it. Actually, I'm going to bring them on. Oh, they left. They left us. I think that was my friend Jordan that called in. It was area code 208, which is Idaho. Anyway, Jordan, if you want to call in, you can actually call my phone number, and I can add you onto the call if you'd like. And that way I know it's you, because it only gives me the phone number. It doesn't give me who it is. So anyway. And anybody who has my phone number, you can call in and I will merge you into the call and you can make comments and everything. Everybody else has got to wait till the end of the reading. Let's see. Since the first manifesto was apparently not very effective, they issued another. In fact, there was an intermittent stream of little manifestos in support of the more significant ones. The third major manifesto came on June 17, 1933, issued by the first presidency, Heber J. Grant, Anthony W. Ivins, and Charles Nibley. Actually, I'm gonna bring area code 208 on just to see who it is. Area code 208, you are live on the radio. Who is this and where are you calling from?
Right, this is Jordan. Boise.
Oh, it's hard to hear you.
Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's really hard to hear you. And the people on the radio. Yeah?
Jordan from Boise. How's that?
Oh, hey, Jordan. I thought that was you, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well,
did
you
have
caught
any,
me at a good time.
Well, the last two that I did were at I started them at 11:30 at night, and then I started them again at 3 in the morning, because I'm trying to do them when I can do them. And
yeah.
I was gonna probably go out tonight, but my wife said that it's snowing like crazy outside, so I guess I'll stay home and get some sleep tonight. But I might do another one later on after midnight. But did you have any comments on anything?
I just thought I would, add my witness also. That I guess I more just agree with, how you were talking about the Constitution and how that's really from God, but where we're at now, we don't really use that. And I guess in general, the point I'm trying to make, to just make a long story short, is that with the politics stuff, I don't understand why people still want to play that game at this point, especially the Mormons, when the Book of Mormon is completely full of stories and warnings against secret combinations, and it's not about a right or a left anymore. It really needs to be, truly what we're really dealing with, are powers and dominions on a spiritual level, but at the same time, I see so many people on those few Facebook groups that we're on, talking about, so-and-so senator said this and Trump's going to do this, when it's really mostly just a show. And, everybody can have their own opinion, but really I think people should just divert their focus from that when there's so many other things going on and so much time you could spend. I just don't even get enough time to read the scriptures, let alone I can't keep up with all the political drama anyway. So it's just refreshing to get rid of it.
One of the things that the devil does, and this is one of his greatest attacks towards me, is he keeps me so preoccupied with other things that I don't turn towards the things that I need to do, which is scripture study or doing these radio programs or praying. That's one of his greatest tools for me. One of the ways that he attacks me is he keeps me as distracted as he can. And I think that he uses the political things to distract as well. And so I agree with I agree with you that it can be a huge distraction. I think that all things should be had in balance, though. I don't think we should ignore what's going on, but it shouldn't be our main focus. Zion's redemption.
Oh no, I would. We can't be apathetic at the same time, you know. But again, as one person or two people, it does feel like quite the battle when the corruption feels so deep. You're talking about Wilford, Woodruff, and the Bohemian Grove. I was just thinking I should go save those articles because things like this are just getting harder and harder to find, and these are just things that people wouldn't even believe. And I should go look them up.
In 2012, and I think it was a miracle that I was able to find them because I've gone back and tried to find them again, and I can't find them. The articles that talk about those things. So, do you have them?
I thought I had one, but I was thinking you mentioned 4, and I was like, I don't remember 4. But
actually, 3. There was.
Somebody must have them.
Yeah, I know there's probably more than that, but
maybe Kevin has some of that stuff.
Yeah, they go down the memory hole. Like, the church wants everything to just disappear so they can whitewash everything, and they can do that because they're so powerful, the money that they have.
Yeah, there's really a controlled information. I mean, you're talking about how most people don't even know how many other LDS groups are out there when you're in the mainstream church. Like, in fact, I don't go very often, but when I do go to the LDS Church, sometimes I notice funny things now, and I talk to people that ask me simple things like, "What's that Bible you have?" And I say, like, "Well, that's the inspired one from our LDS Church," and they're just kind of like, they give me this look that's like, what? Well, or even if they know that, they'll be like, well, but that's the LDS Church. They're not the true church. We can't.
Yeah.
If it was something we needed, we would have it, and our prophet would tell us that we should have it. There's
the only reason
there's just this crazy brainwash.
LDS Church is because Emma had the copyright on it, and she only allowed a certain number of passages. So we have the Joseph Smith translation. We have selected ones in the the Utah Saints Church, corporate headquarters of the church presidency. But we don't have the full thing. That's controlled by the RLDS Church, which has that. So. But a lot of people don't even realize that there were many breakoffs that went out of Nauvoo, and most people think, it was just that Brigham Young left, and certain people stayed behind, and they didn't want to be there because of Brigham Young, and they whitewashed that history, and they don't. The members of the church, they just don't know any better because of the whitewashed history. But they also believe, it's our church against every other church, and they don't realize that there are more than one fundamentalist group out there. But there are Brigham Young is only one leader of a church that came out of Nauvoo. The whole thing about him being transformed and looking and talking like Joseph Smith was not accounted by anybody until 20 years after the fact, and then people started talking about it, but nobody. There's no contemporary evidence that ever happened, but they don't know these things. They only get into the correlated church approved doctrine, even if it contradicts everything else. So.
Yeah, and talking about it, we'll get. I mean, I'm not the last time I spoke to the bishop where I'm supposed to attend. He wouldn't even let me speak, and I was supposed to, meet the stake president or whatever, but they just never called me back. But it doesn't really matter. I think there's a huge spiritual test that's going on where people need to have the spirit of discernment to look for more, and then they have to sift through what they get. Because you're talking about Emma Smith. And that even that inspired version from the LDS Church, like I find like Isaiah chapter 4 verse 1 is not in there because it's a reference to polygamy. It's just not. It's missing. So everything's tainted. Everything's been twisted. So even this Bible that I'm told.
Is that the one where it says 7 women will take hold of one man?
Yeah, so I found this because I was doing a comparison between like 3 or 4 different Isaiah translations and the one that Rob did, and I just came across it, and I was like, what, this whole verse is missing, and so that just really, it's unfortunate that I can't even get a full, honest copy with no bias, with no man-made, changes, but if you don't have the spirit of discernment, if you're not like seeking after truth, you're just not going to find it. And that's why I like the stuff that Rob puts out so much, because it's that deeper level, that inner spiritual work that has to be done. That really, that's what we should be focusing on. Yeah, the things that are unseen, and getting yourself aligned and balanced between these two opposing pillars. This kind of thing is something that I've really been grateful to be exposed to. It helps me understand Yeshua's teaching so much better.
Yeah, and for those who are listening, he's talking about Rob Kay's blog, The Mormon Yeshiva. So
right.
You can go take a look at that, Mormon Yeshiva. Just Google it, or MormonYeshiva.com, I think, or is it The Mormon Yeshiva? I can't remember.
I think it's just Mormon Yeshiva, on the website address. But
and Jordan,
really good
who we're
stuff
speaking to right now, he does videos and stuff that he posts in the different groups, reading old blog posts that talk about these things, and he gives us commentary and stuff. So it's
really been fun to
that stuff out.
It's fun to take the stuff that Rob has given, and like we've been recently frequenting a Messianic congregation here locally, and with the understanding of the Hebrew roots and the being nourished from that mother root, like spoken of in the parable of Jacob. There's just, or I guess it's Zenos, it's recorded in Jacob, but there's so many insights you can give to the Jewish people through our tradition. And when you really talk about, hey, there's more than just the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, as you've mentioned. And I've mentioned to a couple of them, I'm from the tribe of Ephraim, and they kind of just look at me dumbfounded, like, what? These are just things that people just don't even consider,
Yeah, there's.
And I don't do it in a prideful way, but
yeah.
It's just I want everybody to understand that, like, we're supposed to be gathered as an Israelite nation, and we're lost. Our identities are lost, but there are records, and it's spoken of by Yeshua. It's in Ezekiel. There's just things that people don't know.
God knows who we are. Whether or not we understand our genealogy, He knows who we are. When we're called out, as Israelites, and anybody who's adopted through the blood of Yeshua is adopted in the house of Israel. So, but
yeah.
I'm
definitely a removal of stumbling blocks for me.
Yeah, and we can all grow as we move along and study. But like the whole thing about like finding the truth is searching, and most people, they don't search. Most people in the LDS Church, I only learned this because of because I was a gospel doctrine teacher for so long. They just observance that like most people will show up on Sunday and they're not prepared. They don't know what is talked about in the lesson manual unless they've gone to that class 1,000 times, because it changed every 4 years. It's the same class, But very few people actually study things, and they want to be spoon-fed. And like, when I was, in different times when I was in, I study everything as much as I can, and I would like bring insights and stuff to the meetings as just a member of the church in the gospel doctrine classes. And there's been many times when the teacher will say, well, we need to stick to the lesson manual. We shouldn't divert from it, or we shouldn't talk about anything deeper. And like, but that's just the way it is. And like, you talk about a test. Yeah, it's a test. Are we going to obey man, or are we going to obey God? God tests us. And if people don't think that this is a test, well, it is a test. This is God's test. Are we going to be obedient to man or obedient to God? That's the test. That's always the test.
Yeah. It's unfortunate people are just so busy, though. That's really like the trick of this hamster wheel that most of the world runs on, is they don't have the time, or they don't take the time, rather, to look at this, because you have to sacrifice other things. Like, I can't remember the last time I really watched, like a TV show. I mean, we do sometimes, like, but it's just rare. But like Joseph said, like, the more you read them, the more you'll like them, and the more you do these other like worthwhile things and spiritual things, the more you like them. Yeah. And that's what I prefer to do anyway.
I don't know how people have the time to do anything. Although I do watch a lot of TV because I'm so tired when I wake up, or when I get home, that I often will sit down and hold the baby, and my little 4-year-old daughter will watch Miraculous, which is a silly cartoon that I actually love watching it, and she loves watching it. So I do watch a lot of that, but I'm like falling asleep trying to stay awake.
Yeah. Well,
so
I'll actually give some props.
I watch a lot of cartoons as a dad.
Yeah. I'll give some props to the LDS Church on their new Book of Mormon videos. Like, I do like those. My kids like to watch them too.
Yeah.
They're pretty good. Well, I don't want to keep you up too late, Mark, if you're going to...
I've got to finish this reading. I think I've got about a quarter of it left. But thanks for calling in, and you can call back anytime. And it's nice to have a little bit of a break in the reading. Like I was saying before, I wish that I had commercials so that I could like get up and like go and like stretch my legs or something, especially when these long chapters are gone through. So it's kind of nice to have at least a phone call, to kind of break up the reading a little bit, and have somebody else talk, which is nice. I like it when other people talk. But we only have 12 minutes left in the live streaming portion of the radio show, and then it'll go into overdrive. So I see that you're watching on YouTube. So do you want me to just put you on mute, and then that way you can listen, or are you listening on YouTube?
No, I usually do chores while I listen to something, so I'll just continue about my business on the phone. You can mute me.
Okay, I'll put you back in the box, as it were, and we will get right back into the reading, and then I'll bring you back on when I finish, see if there's anything else that you want to, any other comments that you have. So anybody else can call in. The guest call-in number is 917-889-8827. That's 917-889-8827. And so what happens in 11 minutes is we go into the overdrive portion of the radio show, and all of the phone lines are cut off, except for those who have called in. So if somebody has called in, like Jordan from Boise, he'll be able to stay on the phone, and then I'll be able to bring him back up as soon as we're done with the reading. And anybody else who wants to call in can also call in and do that. But you can also make comments on the Facebook or on the YouTube video, the YouTube live video. And I think we'll just get right back into the reading, and then I'll bring Jordan and whoever else on as soon as we are done with the official reading. All right, let's see. Okay. As an official statement, again, without the backup of heavenly revelation, there was a constant barrage of announcements to emphasize the church members that it was their duty to inform on anyone they thought might believe or teach or practice plural marriage. So not only, like, they and this happened to me, right? Like, somebody heard that I believed in plural marriage, and they reported me to the state president in Vermont. You know, but it's not only, like, it's not about, like, do you believe it or do you practice it? Like, do you teach it? Do you believe it? Like, you can be punished for beliefs. That contradicts the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith. You know, there's quotes where Joseph Smith states that, like, you shouldn't be punished for your beliefs, but not in the Mormon church. If you believe something that's contrary to their doctrine, like plural marriage or the Adam God doctrine, even though it was taught in church history, you can be excommunicated for that. How dare you believe it? And then you've got to do these testos where you deny it, even if you believe it, they want to hear you deny it, right? But not let us, even if we don't teach it. I didn't teach the Adam God doctrine. I believe it. I believe it in a way that is not common among people. But anyway, getting back to the reading, we have been, however, and we are entirely willing and anxious to that such offenders against the law of the state should be dealt with and punished as the law provides. We have been and we are willing to give such legal assistance as we legitimately can in the criminal prosecution of such cases. We are willing to go to such limits not only because we regard it as our duty to, as citizens of the country, to assist in the enforcement of the law and suppression of pretended plural marriages, but also because we wish to do everything humanly possible to make our attitude towards this matter so clear, definite, and unequivocal as to leave no possible doubt from it in the mind of any person. End quote. Messages of the First Presidency, Volume 5, page 292 and 293. Those holding church leadership positions increasingly fought against plural marriage instead of teaching and practicing it. But the prophet Joseph Smith had said, where there is no change of priesthood, there is no change of ordinances. Teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith, page 308. Meaning, where there is changes in the priesthood, or changes in the ordinances, there are changes in the priesthood. So you have a different priesthood than that which was revealed by the prophet Joseph Smith, or restored by the prophet Joseph Smith. Page 89. Conversely, then, if there is a change in ordinances, there is a change or loss of priesthood. Comparisons and contradictions. During the years leading up to the 1890 Manifesto, many justifications for political compromise were presented by church leaders and members alike. But for every one they thought up, God had already countered one of his own. Consider the following comparison quotes on 7 issues. Compromise, temples, unanimous vote, the wisest course, leading people astray, power and dominion, continuing importance of plural marriage, and compromise. The God of heaven commanded me to do what I did do. And when the hour came that I was commanded to do that, it was all clear to me. I went before the Lord, and I wrote that the Lord told me to write the manifesto. The Lord told him to write the manifesto, not to, like, dictate a revelation of the Lord. It's just a lie. But I leave this with you and for you to contemplate and consider. Excerpts of the 3 addresses by President Wilford Woodruff regarding the manifesto, Doctrine and Covenants, and that That's a book that was published in 1981, page 93. Let not my servants who are called to the presidency of my church deny my word or my law, which concerns the salvation of the children of men. Place not yourselves in jeopardy to your enemies by promise. The law is that we are sealed by the law of adoption in a sealing link, men to women, women to men, but also through the law of adoption, which was done away with by Wilford Woodruff as well. Those are true doctrines. And anyway, continuing, let my servant who officiates as your counselors before the courts make their pleadings as they are moved upon by the Holy Spirit without any further pledges from my priesthood. And quote 1889 Revelation to Wilford W. Woodruff, Message of the First Presidency, Clark, Volume 3, page 176, or on page 90. Temples. Before I go on, just putting that phone number out there again. We've got 4 minutes left in the live streaming portion of the radio program. The guest caller number is 917-889-8827. Temples. Yes, I saw by vision and revelation this temple in the hands of the wicked. I saw our city in the hands of the wicked. I saw every temple in these valleys in the hands of the wicked. I saw great destruction among the people. All of these things would have come to pass as God Almighty lives, had not the manifesto been given. Discourses Wilford Woodruff, page 214. Zion shall prevail against her enemies. My people, so these are contradictions, right? So you've got one statement, and then you've got another statement, which is a contradiction to the first statement. Zion shall prevail against her enemies. My people shall not be hindered in building of my temples unto my holy name, if they will hearken unto my voice and do as I command them. 1880 Revelation to Wilford Woodruff. So he contradicts himself. Let's see here. Unanimous vote. When the manifesto was given, they accepted it. Why? Because they had the Spirit of God for themselves. They knew for themselves it was right. It was passed also before 10,000 Latter-day Saints, which it's kind of funny because, like, in the tabernacle, you used to be able to have 10,000 in the tabernacle. Now you can only have 6 because people have gotten so big in these later years. But let me see here. And if they knew it was right that the manifesto be passed and, like, they give up plural marriage, how come they continued to live plural marriage? How come many of the people who signed the manifesto or supported it in the Quorum of the 12, how come they continued to live and conduct plural marriage if this was right before the Lord, right? It was passed also before 10,000 Latter-day Saints, and there was not a solitary hand raised against that edict. Discourses of Wilford Woodruff, page 214. At the century's distance, it is difficult to ascertain precisely what the strength of the vote was. The official report in the Deseret News and accounts given since in the publication of the church say that approval for the manifesto was unanimous. Statements in other accounts, also friendly to the church, describe the vote as near unanimous. While we know of one confirmed contrary vote, there is evidence that some refused to vote either way, including at least one of the general authorities. This was Brigham H. Roberts, E.H. Roberts, who reflected on the property. 90 seconds left in the live streaming portion of the radio program. Yes, call-in number is 917-889-8827. Reflected on the propriety of presenting the manifesto in conference at all, said, during the conference, I saw that movements were on foot to have the whole people support it, a proceeding I viewed with alarm. When the crisis came, I felt heartbroken but remained silent. It seemed to me to be the awfulest moment of my life. My arm was like lead when the motion was put. I could not vote for it and did not. Solemn Covenant, B. Harmon Hardy, page 135. So we have 43 seconds left in the live streaming portion of the radio show. One last time, the guest call-in number is 917-889-8827. All right, the wisest course. I hope we can finish this in the next hour, because the live streaming, the overdrive portion of the radio show only lasts 45 minutes to an hour, I think. And I don't like to go into it because that means I've been reading for 2 hours. But we're going to try to get it. We're going to try to get through this. The wisest course. The question is this: which is the wisest course for the Latter-day Saints to pursue? To continue to attempt to practice plural marriage with the laws of the nation against it, or after doing and suffering what we have through our adherence to this principle, to cease the practice and submit to the law, and doing so leave the prophets, apostles, and fathers at home? Address, Doctrine and Covenants, current edition, page 292. For my priesthood, whom I have called and whom I have sustained and honored, shall honor me and obey my laws and the laws of my priesthood, saith the Lord. October 13th, 1882, Revelation to John Taylor from Jesus Christ, which is spoken of in the Messages of the First Presidency, Volume 2, page 347. So like when Heber J. Grant's like, I don't know that ever happened, or he denies it outright. Well, Messages of the First Presidency, Volume 2, page 347, he can go find the evidence for that. Anyway, leading the people astray. I say to Israel, the Lord will never permit me nor any other man who stands as president of this church to lead you astray. It is not in the program. It is not in the mind of God. And quote Wilford Woodruff, History of His Life and Labors by Matthias F. Cowley, page 572. And this is like a doctrine that they cling to, right? The prophet of the church and the apostles and the leaders can never lead you astray. And my example that they can is they completely deny and reject the Adam God doctrine that was taught from the pulpit of General Conference and in other places from 1852 to 1877 by Brigham Young and taught by John Taylor and others after the death of Brigham Young as doctrine. And now the church says, well, they led you astray in that doctrine, but then they also say that they can't lead you astray, which is a lie. It's a lie to the church. They lie to your face. And you know these things if you have a history and you are, if you study these things out, you know that the LDS Church lies to its members and whitewashes Joseph Smith. It whitewashes the doctrine. It gets rid of things in the scriptures to go along with their current program, hoping that we can wash it all down the memory hole, which Bruce R. McConkie and Marky Peterson talked about. We want these things to go down the memory hole because they don't want you to know about it. Guess what? There's guys like me who are going to bring it out because I want you to stop trusting these guys and trust God. Turn to God. It's really a test. Are you going to follow God or are you going to follow man? Are you going to find out what truth is, regardless of who taught what? I mean, Brigham Young taught some things from his own mind that a lot of fundamentalists that they believe is pure doctrine. They don't find out for themselves. God wants all of us to be prophets, to receive revelation, confirmation of the Holy Spirit, and the testimony of Jesus Christ. Anyway, continuing on. So this next statement will contradict the, leading, the church, the prophet can never lead you astray. Okay, so this one contradicts that. And if he should suffer him, Joseph Smith, to lead the people astray, it would be because they ought to be led astray. If he should suffer them, Jesus Christ, if he should suffer them to be chastised and some of them destroyed, that would be because they deserve it. Brigham Young, Journal of Discourses, Volume 4, page 297 and 298. And why would they deserve it? Because they place a lie. So 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, All they who believe a lie receive strong delusion that they all might be damned because they had not a love of the truth. In Second Nephi, it talks about, putting your trust in the flesh. You can hear what the prophet says. You can hear what teachers say. You need to go for yourself to find out if what they are teaching is true. And even if I receive a thus saith the Lord revelation and I give it out, you may misunderstand it. This could happen to Joseph Smith. It could happen to anybody. Miscommunication, whatever. You understand something a certain way, so your interpretation of what is being taught is a certain way. If you would go to the Father and tell him what you believe is being said about whatever revelation or instruction, and the Spirit withdraws from you, you can know that your interpretation is wrong. And then I always ask, help me understand the truth of it. And sometimes God will show it to me, or other times I'll have to go and study it more before I'll get revelation and whatever, and then other times the interpretation is right and the Spirit it grows within me and I feel the confirmation of the Holy Spirit. One of the big, I don't know why this keeps coming in my mind, but the 7 spirits of God mentioned in the book of Revelations. God, I believed something completely, I told them, I remember I was driving on I-80 in the wintertime, so I used to drive for FedEx from Salt Lake to Denver in the wintertime, and I remember driving along, and I was contemplating the 7 spirits of God mentioned in the book of Revelations. And I told God what I believed about it, and the Spirit withdrew from me. And I was like, oh, okay, so I was wrong about that. So I repented and turned back to God and told him I was sorry for believing false doctrine. But then I was like, I can't understand this scripture. Please help me understand it. And I'm not going to tell you what he told me, but he set me straight concerning that particular scripture. And I was like, oh, wow. I had never thought of that before. And so I went back to the Father and I said, okay, this is what I believe you shared with me. This is what I believe you told me. And the Spirit got really strong, which, hey, guess what? Anytime I can get a hit of the Holy Spirit when it's really strong, sign me up, And I was so happy that I had been revealed the true knowledge of the 7 spirits of God in the book of Revelations, which I'm not going to talk about on this radio program because I'm just not at this time. So, all right, power and dominion. It is not wisdom for us to make war upon 65 millions of people. It is not wisdom for us to go forth and carry out this principle against the laws of the nation and receive the consequences. Wilford, Woodruff by Cowley, Matthias F. Cowley, page 571. Okay, so here's the contradiction. And you shall be my people, and I will be your God, and your enemies shall not have dominion over you, for I will preserve you and confound them, saith the Lord, and they shall not have dominion over you. October 13, 1882, Revelation, John Taylor, Message of the First Presidency, Volume 2, page 347. Now, why does God stop giving revelation? I don't know. Maybe it's because the revelations he's given have been cast off into the dirt. If people are not going to be obedient, he's not going to speak to them. That goes individually for individuals, and that goes for a church. Like my friend Joshua Sparks, he saw the Father lay his hands on my head. He was told specific things that he should do. Not that I got a revelation for him. He was specifically told by the Father what he should do. Then he didn't do it. He kept not doing it. He stopped receiving revelation. He lost his knowledge, and there was actually a curse that came upon him where he almost lost his dad, his home, his wife, his kids. Health-wise, he's gone downhill, God instructed him to do something, and he didn't do it, and now he doesn't receive revelation at all. The church does the same thing. They received revelation and instruction on what they should do, and they lost that ability to receive revelation, which you don't get any revelation anymore. You get, I was inspired, or whatever they say, you know. But there is no thus saith the Lord revelation, because they were disobedient to what God had asked them to do to begin with. Continuing importance of plural marriage. We, John Nuttall, received a telegram from President Woodruff containing a declaration or manifesto from him in regard to the recent reports of the Utah Commission on the subject of polygamous marriages and the preaching of that doctrine by church authorities, in which he denies their statements and declares himself as willing to obey the laws of the nation on the subject and to advise the members of the church to do likewise, etc. But Brother Kane made arrangements. Actually, I got to say something. If any of you are listening to this and you're like, I've got some other thing I've got to do and I want to listen but I can't, you can always listen to this on iTunes in the future at Fundamentally Mormon on iTunes, or, you know, read it at fundamentallyMormon.com, and you can go to Fundamentally Mormon on the Facebook channel, you know, just for people who are listening, if you feel like there's something that you need to do, like, then you probably should do it, unless it's Satan telling you, you know, to be distracted and whatever. Anyway, I don't know why I had to say that. I just felt like it needed to be said for some reason. So, all right, let's see here. Brother Kane made arrangements to have the declaration or manifesto published in the Evening Star and critique, and to have it printed in a secular letter or pamphlet for distribution to the President, Cabinet, Senate, and House of Representatives and other leading men. Diary of L. John Nuttall, September 25th, 1890. The reason why the church and the kingdom of God cannot advance without a patriarchal order of marriage is that it belongs to this dispensation, just as baptism for the dead does, or any other law or ordinance that belongs to this dispensation. Without it, the church cannot progress. The leading men of Israel who are presiding over stakes will have to obey the law of Abraham, or they will have to resign. Wilford Woodruff, a book by Matthias F. Cowley, page 552. The manifesto, in retrospect, LDS Church historians Leonard Arrington provided a little-known insight into the manifesto, wherein he states that national and church leaders made an agreement or compact. National leaders and church leaders are said to have entered into a compact. We do not know whether such a compact was actually made, but at least the agreement and actions which it is said to have involved take place, its supposed compact. National leaders are said to have promised statehood for Utah, provided three things were done. Number one, plural marriage was abandoned. Number two, the church's political party was dissolved, which is talking about the Council of 50. And number three, the church dissolved its relations with the economy, which is the United Order. So like when we covenant in the temple to live the law of consecration, well, in the 1890s, they were done away with. You're not allowed to live the law of consecration. Not the way it's supposed to be lived, not United Orders. That was all part of giving up the gospel so that they could obtain statehood. Are you going to follow man, or are you going to follow God? And we know in the book of Acts that they had all things in common. That is the law of consecration. Anyway, plural marriage, of course, was abandoned with the Manifesto of 1890. The People's Party was dissolved in 1891, and people were divided between Republicans and Democrats. And the church began to take steps to withdraw from many of its economic activities. And quote, Religious and Economics in Mormon History by Leonard J. Arrington, BYU Studies, Volume 3, page 31 and 32. Like the church like went down the aisles at church, and they would say, this side of the church, you're Democrats, and this side, you're Republican. Like they assigned them what they were going to, as part of this whole like get the church in line with the kingdom of the devil or Babylon the Great. Anyway, Detrimental results followed the agreement to comply with these three compromises. When plural marriage was abandoned, the Mormons reverted back to the Roman law of monogamy with its divorces, mistresses, prostitutions, and immoralities. When the United Order was dissolved, the saints were then encumbered with debts, mortgages, the IRS, and taxation. When the kingdom of God was abolished, that's the Council of 50, the saints were thrown into a wonderful world of Democrats, Republicans, political corruption, a million laws, abandonment of Constitution, and loss of freedom. In retrospect, it could be said that the Manifesto had a greater effect on living the United Order. In retrospect, it could be said that the Manifesto had a greater effect on living the United Order and organizing the kingdom of God than it did on plural marriage. Why? Because plural marriage is flourishing today among thousands, more than at the time of the Manifesto. And I would say hundreds of thousands. There's like over 250,000 fundamentalists just in the West. But the United Order and the Kingdom of God are phantoms of the past. That's not entirely true. They do have pseudo United Orders in some of these groups. Independent fundamentalists, they try to live the United Order as well. But there's a law lived by church members. That's just if you try to live the law of consecration that you have covenants to in your temples and the endowment, then you'll get excommunicated. So, because you can't follow God and follow man, you follow God, they will destroy you and kick you out of the church and do all kinds of things. But come after you with the IRS, the force of the boot and the gun. And anyway, but after all, this is what the Gentiles really wanted all along. The lawmakers were not so forthcoming about their own religious bigotry. Their aim was to destroy the church's economic and political power, and bigamy was their tool. Encyclopedia of Mormonism, Volume 1, page 52. It is generally believed by members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that their church holds all the keys of the priesthood. This theory has been purported by two Mormon authors, Brian Hales and Max Anderson, in their books Priesthood and Modern Polygamy and the Polygamy Story, Fact and Fiction. They refer to Doctrine and Covenants, section 132, verse 7, in which the Lord reveals that there is only one man with that authority. That's another completely misunderstood thing. Here the Lord says, I have appointed unto my servant Joseph to hold this power in the last days. This can mean two things. Number one, the one man is always the president of the church. Or number two, the one man is Joseph Smith, as it is clearly written. This means Joseph Smith could pass on authority and keys to others and still retain all the keys, rights of being the one man presiding over this dispensation. He was the one man that was sealed up to the Father in his time to where people could be sealed to him by the law of adoption and linked to the fathers above, the heavenly fathers and mothers. That was the one-man doctrine. These keys and authority were given to him to seal others to himself. But people don't understand the law of adoption anymore, and they don't understand these things either. So let's see. It states that Joseph holds them in the last days, undoubtedly, meaning in this dispensation. And Joseph taught that there were other dispensations that had to come before the end of the celestial time of this earth. So, of course, there are contradictions, but whatever. Anyway, just because he is a dead prophet does not mean he has lost the presiding keys or authority. We are told he is yet working with his people. He is. Page 95. Hales and Anderson promote the idea that the one man holding all the keys is and always has been the senior apostle, the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. End quote. Priesthood and Modern Polygamy, page 10. However, after the manifesto, the sealing keys seem to have been lost within the church. From their own mouths, they have testified that they no longer hold those keys. President Heber J. Grant claimed, "No man upon the face of the earth has any right or any authority to perform a plural marriage, and there is no plural marriages today in the Church of Christ because no human has the right to perform them." Gospel Standards. Heber J. Grant was the seventh president of the LDS Church, and that was on page 150. If there is one man who was supposed to hold that power in the last days, and now no man upon the face of the earth has any right or any authority to perform a plural marriage, what are we to conclude? Have the last days passed by? Is the one man dead? Is there no way to live this eternal principle? Couldn't that one man have delegated sealing keys to others? It seems that President Heber J. Grant testified that since he did not hold keys of sealing, he assumed that no one else did either. Going back to the time of the 1890 Manifesto, no one can blame Wilford Woodruff for desiring some kind of relief from government oppression. The church sent missionaries, appealed to the press, defended themselves in courts, published literature, sent representatives to Congress, etc. But relinquishing plural marriage seemed to be the only ticket for relief. The major reason they gave for the manifesto were to stop the persecution, to regain their real estate, which didn't happen, to permit Mormon immigration again, which the government had cut off, like forced them to stop doing, to return the temples, which the government had confiscated, and then rented back to them because the government is corrupt as all hell. The return to prevent long and expensive legal defenses, to release men from prison, to return church leaders from the underground, to resume ordinance work in the temple, to stop paying rent to the government for church buildings, to make peace with the nations in the world. Noble reasons, everyone. And no matter how reasonable this all sounded, there was one serious thing wrong with it. The Lord had told them repeatedly not to give up plural marriage. That alone should outweigh all the reasons man can devise. But because the church gave it up as a church law, did not mean that plural marriage was not still a law of the priesthood to be lived outside the church. According to Apostle Franklin D. Richards, it continued to be a matter of free agency. If all Israel will not be sanctified by the law which their Moses, speaking of Joseph Smith, first offers them, they will peradventure receive a law or ordinance administered to them, not according to the power of an endless life. Teachings are it's Journal of Discourses, Volume 1, page 321. We are almost done. When the saints raised their hand to sustain the manifesto, they, as did the children of Israel, traded higher priesthood laws for lesser ones. So today, so tomorrow, or whatever. Like Solomon, he said that there's nothing new under the sun. Well, look in the history of what's happened in the past, and you'll see what's going on in our current day. So, also similar to the children of Israel, they traded the government of God for the government of Babylon and became hewers of wood and drawers of water in the Gentile kingdom. Page 97. A major catastrophe occurred with the announcement of the manifesto. Up to that time, it had been taught that living plural marriage was essential to exaltation. With the acceptance of the manifesto, it meant that from then on, no one in the church was to obey this critical law. There had been no revelation from God saying that this law had been changed. The Mormons simply gave up plural marriage, thinking that it now had nothing to do with their exaltation. So the leaders of the church led the church astray in teaching that these things were required, and then, or the leaders of the church after that point led the church astray in saying that these things didn't matter anymore. Like, you can't have it both ways, people. if the church leaders can't lead you astray, but then they contradict themselves, it's essential for exaltation or it's not essential for exaltation, then they're leading you astray one way or the other, Whatever side you're on is up to you, but anyway. We should just stop this with this whole, I should follow the prophet, and no matter what he says, I'll be blessed for it. No, you should follow God. You should be a prophet of God yourself. He is no respecter of persons. He wants to speak to his people, and they damn themselves to their own unbelief. They're believing lies. Anyway, we should also consider this. If it is incorrect doctrine, then it was also wrong for the previous 40 years, and the church finally got set in order in 1890. On the other hand, if it were an eternal revelation from God and a law for admission into the highest degree of the celestial kingdom, then the manifesto is a farce and meaningless to those who continue to defend it in their theory and practice. Whatever man may think of the manifesto, good or bad, apparently the Lord didn't approve of it. From the time Wilford Woodruff put his signature on that document and the people voted to accept it, the Lord has given no more, thus saith the Lord, revelations to the church. No matter how many explanations and excuses the Mormons offer for compromising with the manifesto, non-Mormons who didn't even believe in plural marriage wondered at their justification for giving it up. For instance, the Catholic Church printed the following in their encyclopedia. One reason given for the persistent hostility to the Mormons was the dislike caused by the acrimonious controversy over polygamy and plural marriage. Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, claimed to have received a revelation and a commandment ordering him to reintroduce plural marriage and restore polygamous conditions tolerated among the pre-Judaic tribes. Polygamy now became a principle and creed of the Latter-day Saints, and though not enforced by the laws of the Mormon hierarchy, was preached by the elders and practiced by the chiefs of the cult and by many of the people. The violation by the Mormons of the monogamous law of Christianity and of the United States was brought to the attention of Congress, which prohibited under penalty of fine and imprisonment the perpetuation of the anti-Christian practice, refusing, however, to make the prohibition retroactive. The Mormons appealed to the Supreme Court, which sustained the action of Congress and established constitutionality and anti-polygamous statutes. The Latter-day Saints, strangely enough, submitted to the decrees of Congress, unwittingly admitting by their submission that the revelation of their founder and prophet Joseph Smith could not have come from God. If the command to restore polygamy was to the modern world was from on high, then by submitting to the decision of the Supreme Court, the Mormon hierarchy reversed the apostolic proclamation and acknowledged it was better to obey man than to obey God. What a poor example was set for other world religions when the Grand Compromise of 1890 was issued. Since the Gentiles will criticize the saints for both living and not living these principles, it seems the safest course to pursue is to obey God's laws rather than man's laws. So, all right, I'm going to bring Jordan back up and see if he has anything else to say. Should warn you a little bit beforehand, but we're done with the reading. So, are you there, Jordan? And he might be doing chores right now. I think I hear him. Are you there, Jordan? Okay, that's fine. He's probably got other things going on. It is 10:30 at night, and I know that I've missed my opportunity to see my wife at all today. Like, I was asleep when she got home. I guess I saw her this morning, but I didn't realize that this chapter was going to be so long. But anyway, like I said, anybody can read the text to this at ogdenkraut.com or fundamentallimormon.com. They can listen to this audio on the podcasts at iTunes under Fundamentally Mormon, or watch the video at youtube.com/user/God is my compass. Channel name Messiah Ben Joseph. Oh no, I'm sorry, I changed it. Channel name is Fundamentally Mormon. So, all right, we're going to end this radio program. This has been Zion's Redemption Radio Network program. I am your host, Mark Lichtenwalter, and we will be back on later with Chapter 7 of the Church and the Priesthood. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Take care. God bless, and goodbye.